So I just got back from TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and I got to moderate a panel with some absolute heavy hitters. I want to tell you all about it. We had the co-founder of Wonder Dynamics that just got acquired by Autodesk. We had the Netflix and DreamWorks veteran leading industry of AI standards. We even had the director of DC's Blue Beetle and the team behind the first 100% AI generated animated series that's about to hit theaters. So forget about the hype. Here's what's really happening when Hollywood's top creators are actually using AI tools in practice. So this is one of the world's most prestigious film festivals where industry decision makers actually gather. A lot of the films that they're showing at the film festival are like ready to be distributed, to major streaming platforms, theaters. We're talking about the real stuff. And that's what's important and significant here is this is the first time Toronto International Film Festival had a open discussion around AI, and I'm so happy I got to moderate it. If you're curious with my movement, I just got a treadmill so I could move around a lot more when I'm in the office. So one of the first guests we had was Christina Lee Storm, co-founder of Playbook, Netflix and DreamWorks veteran, leads TV Academy and AI standards. We had Ángel, Puerto Rican filmmaker, directed DC's Blue Beetle, championing ethical AI, and Seungwoo Kim, CJ&M's creative director, shipping the first 100% AI-generated series to theaters. And we also had Nikola, a co-founder of Wonder Dynamics that was just acquired by Autodesk for just major capital. So you could think of this video as like getting a backstage access to a Broadway show with the actual directors, choreographers, and producers. We're seeing how the magic actually happens, not just the final performance that you see on the stage. So I started off by asking them, what actually surprises them in this entire industry? Like, what's going on? Ángel had this story about a drone shot where he couldn't afford a helicopter to shoot over the city for one of his films. So what he did instead was he used his phone footage plus some photos, and he kind of created the movement that he wanted with his phone. And then he used that to kind of guide the motion, and he had AI to create a convincing aerial footage. I thought that was really cool. It's kind of like having like a Swiss Army knife that suddenly grows a helicopter blade when you need it. So so Onhill's kind of using it as like a rapid prototyping tool for expensive shots. Now we have another one, which is kind of like this revolution in the speed of producing animated series. And this one comes from like something I noticed from Wonder Dynamics. He had this example where he said, traditionally 40 seconds of animation per day is like what you can get out of most animation studios. But with their AI tools, this has dramatically faster output. So we're talking like, they're doing multiple minutes of animation in a day instead of just 40 seconds. It's remarkable. Another theme that I kind of noticed from our panel was like using AI as like this communication bridge. Let's say you can use AI to help communicate your vision, turning your abstract ideas into a visual reference that anybody can understand. It helps you make more mistakes faster and get those things addressed earlier on in production. I thought that was a really cool insight from our panelists. Another like key theme was that there was like this process reality check. Here I was thinking that they're going to give us some crazy like new insights into how AI filmmaking is. But one of the themes I got from the panelists is that it's actually not magic. It's still filmmaking. There's still a lot of pre-production work. They're still processing like the script. They're still having artists do storyboards. They're still doing concept artwork. The AI tools are just kind of just added into their existing pipelines. They're not actually replacing their pipelines. It's very additive. It's not the marketing that we get all the time when we think about AI tools. People are like, this new thing came out and it's going to destroy Hollywood. That was not what the actual practitioners in Hollywood were saying. That's just kind of more hype. To quote Ángel, he said something like, still like to do drawing on paper. I still like to direct actors, his own words. There was a really cool workflow that Seungwoo Kim shared. And they have this 3D dummy workflow that I thought was really fascinating. What they do is they actually use traditional 3D software and they put in an animated dummy, in a 3D model that they have kind of steer the direction of characters in their worlds. So even though they have that buzz of saying their film is 100% AI generated, the inputs that they're putting in, like they're having 3D animators animate objects, they're using that to then inform and style transfer with AI. But there's that 3D dummy workflow involves, creating 3D models, coming up with the angles, coming up with composition. And that was like a really cool, insight. What this is showing me is that a lot of the like traditional skills of filmmaking and 3D animation are actually very applicable to these new AI workflows. In fact, they're actually helping people get their AI stuff produced better because they have traditional skills. AI is like having this really talented intern. Might be incredibly helpful, but you still might need to be the director for them. You don't want to just let the intern do everything. It's not your vision at that point. The theme that came up on the panel was around industry standards and there are some new industry standards that are coming to AI. Now, this is coming straight out of Christina, who's actually in leadership, part of the TV Academy's new guidelines. And they have these like three key principles that she mentioned that are emerging. One of them is this creative integrity for professionals needs to be a part of the equation. Another one is permission and licensing. That's really that big legal question that everyone's really curious about. And the last standard that's coming is around accountability and transparency. That is the licensing question. So to quote Christina, she said, is the AI model trained on ethically sourced, properly licensed data? That's a question that's going to be coming up. And I think that's part of the reason why TIFF felt comfortable talking about AI filmmaking now, because we have options where you can have ethically sourced and properly licensed data. This is really becoming one of those make or break questions for studios, because if they go through the whole process of using AI in their workflows only to hit the legal department and be halted and say we can't proceed because we don't know how this was sourced and we can't verify that you can actually own a commercial license to that data, these are the questions. So I thought it was really cool that the academy is starting to create some of these standards. It's like we're moving out of the Wild West and now we're starting to get sheriffs in the town. And I think this is actually good for everyone because lawlessness isn't great. Another question I asked the group was around when not to use AI and what were some of the creative limitations. So one of them thing is like it's really answering the question of what's still human only. And that came down to performance and acting direction. So some of the core creative decision making, it's still very human. The acting and performing is still very human. There was this phrase of the 10,000 hours of artistic development. But there's this speed paradox because the AI generated iterations are faster than teams can actually make decisions. So this new bottleneck is actually the approval process. It's not actually the creation time. And I thought that was a cool kind of flip because in the past, the bottleneck was we don't have enough time to create. Now it's like, now we can create very fast, but we don't have enough time to approve all this stuff. So the metaphor I heard was like, it's like having a Ferrari, but then being stuck in traffic. Another big thing was the democratization of story. So Angel's perspective was, from Puerto Rico, he said, he had limited resources, but he always had very big creative ambitions. So now he sees like AI tools allowing more stories to actually be told by more people. So instead of not replacing the big productions, but now enabling new ones altogether. He mentioned, much of his creative career, the hardest thing was getting a camera. It's very similar to that, but now it's like there's no boundary. I asked Christina around like multi-platform thinking. She's got a lot of background in extended reality, XR, and she said some of the creative assets that are feeding the films actually translates very nicely to games and XR experiences. So kind of using AI generated images to then create AI generated models that then could be animated and rigged for video games. So we have a world where there's now like this multi-platform thinking that you can go into your creative ideas. That's a lot easier to achieve than before. The last thing was around world building. So you can now do real world building beyond single projects. Instead of building a house, you're building a neighborhood. The question isn't, will AI replace filmmakers? It's actually, which filmmakers will learn to work with AI? And based on what I learned moderating this conversation at TIFF with some of the industry's biggest names, the answer is the ones who understand that technology serves story, not the other way around. They're the ones that are good. Some different quotes that kind of stood out to me was, if you bypass the artistic process, where do artists come from? Another quote that stood out to me is, it may give you the opportunity that instead of doing one movie, you can do 2 or 3 projects. Another quote that stood out to me was, we wanted to build something that works with your existing pipeline. Another quote that was cool was, the more we fail, the more strongly we're going to feel about the things that are succeeding. Canada was phenomenal. I'd never been up until now. So big thank you to Canada. And thank you to the Toronto International Film Festival for inviting us. We're so happy to be there. And yeah, the conversations were wonderful. Hopefully this video was helpful at kind of just hearing how do some of the top creators actually use AI right now? Not just the theory, but like actual filmmakers, theatrical releases, series, TV shows. And here you go. And that's that.